Everybody's talking about generative AI, and it has really filled the entire conversation enough that business people, executives in industries outside the world of software development and IT are starting to think about how Gen AI can revolutionize their business. But let me ask you, do you think that it can really move the needle? That's the discussion on this episode of the Tech Field Day podcast. Welcome to the Tech Field Day podcast, where we're both on premise and, yes, this week, on premises. Each time we meet, we bring together a group of IT luminaries to discuss a single topic or premise. This week, we're here at AppDev Field Day recording an episode focused on the impact of generative AI on the enterprise. Yeah, I know, but bear with us. It's a really good discussion. Before we begin, though, let's meet who's on the panel.
Hi, I'm Jack Pauler. I'm an industry analyst. I started my own firm recently, Paradigm Technica, and you can find me blogging on LinkedIn.
And I'm Calvin Hendryx-Parker. I'm CTO and co-founder of 6 Feet Up. We are a Python and AI for Good consulting agency, and you can find me on Twitter or X at CalvinHP.
Hi, I'm Josh Atwell. I'm a DevRel and marketing leader, free agent at the moment, and I am on X at Josh_Atwell and on LinkedIn.
I'm going to re-record my opening because I fucked it up. Let's try that again. But you guys did great, so we'll just paste this around. Here we go, Corey.
Love editing.
So everybody is talking about AI, and everybody is probably excited or worried or both about what happens with AI. But one of the things that we're hearing is that a lot of companies out there are trying to figure out how they're going to benefit from generative AI. And this week's premise is, frankly, not a bright spot for those companies. The topic or the premise that we're going to be discussing today is the fact, in our opinions, that maybe enterprises won't actually benefit all that much from generative AI. Maybe it won't be really worth the effort. And I guess let's start off with you, Jack. You suggested this topic, so why won't it move the needle?
Well, I think generative AI is very much in its infancy, right? And what we don't know right now is exactly how to build applications that do anything more than what we currently do today, just faster, right? So if an enterprise invests in AI, are they simply taking exactly what they're doing today and making it work a little bit faster, or are they going to transform their business? And I think that's really the issue. If you're going to invest the amount of money and time and resources that it takes to do generative AI, what are you getting out of it? And I don't see it today. I don't see any groundbreaking applications that are moving the needle in one way or another.
I think Jack picked the topic so we could say the word AI over and over again to make sure we hit all the hot spots. I will say that I think generative AI actually is going to benefit the enterprise. I think there's a lot of use cases we're not seeing that are kind of working behind in the long tail of enterprise applications. I mean, just from an application standpoint alone, the ability to have generative AI build unit tests and functional tests, automated testing for the applications is a huge time saver just with that one alone. I think the next thing you're going to see is going to be the ability for generative AI to handle a lot of the kind of go-betweens where we're going to actually, for example, building a query. If you had a large faceted search that you were building a query and maybe it had hundreds, if not 1,000 facets, that's an unusable UI by a human, but it'd be really useful and interesting for people to be able to slice and dice their data in such a way that they may actually extract additional value. But if you can actually chat with that search bar, it builds some pre-made, preset limitations or kind of filters it down for you automatically or gets you to a usable point by a human, there's another big win there in potentially discovering things.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty reasonable take. I look at the current state on AI within the enterprise as a defensive posture, right? You've got a lot of companies now who they have employees, whether they're in the legal department, whether they're in the development team, whether they're in marketing, who are using these public AI frameworks. And there's a real concern that, hey, do we have intellectual property leaking out into these platforms? Is what we're getting back, or these teams getting back, actually something that we can trust? Is it going to be a risk? I have family members who work in the pharmaceutical industry, and they're actively saying, okay, you cannot use these external AI models, but we are working on taking OpenAI or some other model, bringing in, we're going to create our own thing with our own data and do our own thing. no real timeline for some of those as to when that's actually going to, net a valuable outcome. But I think right now it's very much a defensive type of thing. It's like the genie's out of the bottle. People know about these tools. They're going out and trying to use them, and they're trying to determine like what is our comfort level and how do we want to govern and keep track of how this is getting utilized. Because I don't think, to Jack's point, I don't think holistically there is a real understanding about how this technology is going to improve the way these enterprises operate and run.
Well, I think that really kind of hits the nail on the head. I don't think a lot of these enterprises really understand what it even is. I think a lot of them are hearing about it. They're hearing, AI is like a wave on top of a wave on top of a wave in terms of buzz. It is everywhere. It is, everybody's talking about it. Your grandma's probably talking about it. But do they really have any idea of what generative AI is, apart from knowing that it's buzz, 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 and they got to get them some of that AI magic?
I guarantee their employees are using it, whether they put a policy in place to say they can't or not. They've got their phone with them, they're opening up the ChatGPT app, and they're starting to talk to it.
Yeah.
And they're getting value.
Well, and then also, in an earlier discussion, I don't think there's a person in an enterprise anywhere that is in the process of buying a product or renewing a product, particularly software, where AI is incorporated into that product or is at least being marketed and promoted as contributing to that product. So there's also a level of, how do I gain enough understanding to actually recognize whether or not I'm getting a real added value, and maybe they're even trying to charge premiums for that value, or they're trying to differentiate. There's a risk associated with that, and so I think that's the biggest exposure that they're getting more than anything.
Well, and it's the value part that I think is the missing picture here, right? And yeah, there's a lot of employees you can get a little bit of use of it, and people are doing things, and I see that, right? But when I look at that different on a personal level, where I can do a little bit here, a little bit there, and to me, that all of that is acceleration of one form or another. I'm accelerating the business, and there is value about that. But is there anything else? If I'm a CIO who's leading a large organization, and I'm looking at it and saying, we're contemplating investing not tens of dollars, not hundreds of dollars, but millions or maybe tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars into an AI effort for the organization. Where is that leading? What am I doing? What is transformational about that rather than, revolutionary rather than evolutionary? And I look at it, and we had an earlier discussion at lunch about the interface, and one of the beautiful things I think about the AI is the ability to understand things in English language right now, which means that you can go give a computer an English language and not a query, which is where most people are doing, not doing a data search, but do something else that's much more transformational. As a security guy, I look at it and say, I'd like to be able to set policies to say, hey, Josh can look at this set of stuff. He's allowed to look at accounting data because he's in the accounting department, but he's not allowed to look at engineering plans. And that's all I should have to do as a security guy, and everything else should happen automatically because the AI has the ability to take that English language statement and translate it into things that computers can understand. And that means that the business gets this huge value of not having to do all of the thousand steps that would normally take to translate a business leader's commands into execution at the computer level.
Well, and less error prone potentially, because less humans potentially are involved in that understanding of can see, can't see of a document or of a type of piece of data.
So there's clearly risk in it, but I look at the Microsoft and the Googles and all these other companies that are doing the co-pilots, right? Yeah. To me, that co-pilot is really just accelerating search, and that's it.
You can accelerate search, but I think there's also a flip side to that, in that we can accelerate the ability to understand if we have incorrect permissions set on documents or data sources inside the infrastructure. Most people's OneDrives or SharePoints are probably a mess of share this link to a specific person. Yeah. It would take a human, an error-prone human, a long time to discern whether they've got documents that are shared with the wrong people, or you can unleash a model against that. Actually, it's really good at classifying whether there's risk or not risk associated with it. So it's more than even generative AI. It's like using AI to actually discern whether you've got risks, outstanding risks.
Well, see, I think, but that's exactly my point, is it's more than generative AI.
It's more than generative AI,
That's
yeah.
right. The generative AI part of it, the output part, where we are today is we're saying, okay, take an English language thing and then use that to generate output, a picture, some text, whatever it is, right? It's going much further beyond that and saying, how do I take this thing and apply it to solve these real world problems that then have the potential to transform in my company, whether it's the security aspects of it, or whether it's how do I say, look at everything, Josh came in and talked to me and said he wants a loan to buy a house, right? Now, what are all the steps involved in that and how do I do that? And what is it that an AI can do for me that changes that whole business model of applying for a loan and getting a loan, right?
And to that point, I think I want to sharpen the conversation here. I didn't say AI, I said generative AI.
Right.
And what I meant was, and what I think that Jack is kind of hitting here is that, think about things like LLMs, think about things like some of these other generative AI that can, generate an image or generate audio or video or whatever. How are those things really going to move the needle? Not for the world, but for enterprises, for the average company out there that is not in the software development business necessarily. Just any of the thousands of 100+ person companies out there that are trying to do something, and they've got this chatbot or they've got this image generator and they're excited about it. They know they need this thing because it's getting a lot of buzz. How is that thing really going to benefit them? And I think that that's kind of where this conversation is going, because I don't think any of us are Luddites. I don't think any of us are saying AI is dumb or doesn't work or something. But I think all of us are realistic and saying, hold on, I don't think it's quite what you think it is, right?
Yes.
I can look at a couple of scenarios. Like, for instance, you have a company, a smaller company like you were describing, who they are in the process of developing a new marketing plan. And rather than invest millions of dollars to work with a firm to develop all the graphics and all the visuals and the copy, working with a generative AI system and say, hey, this is who we want to reach. This is our core message. This is the key outcomes. Like, how would you frame out a marketing campaign? You can already do that, and it will give you samples for banners. It will give you samples for copy that you can put on your website. Like, that's something that they can do, and that has tangible value. And of course, they can take that, make modifications. The difficult part, though, and I've seen this with, honestly, it's a bar in my hometown. The owner is using ChatGPT to create social media graphics and to create menus and things like that. The problem he runs into, and I love this guy, but the problem he runs into is it doesn't quite give it to him the way he wants it, and making minor edits is very difficult. So the fine-tuning becomes challenging. So he's getting really great material that he can use to promote his business and to grow his business, but then there's a skills gap or a tooling gap between, it's like, oh, like it did that thing that really just looks off or weird. If only that would go away. But the system has difficulty like fixing that. But it's improving.
But I don't think that's the revolutionary change we're kind of aspiring to here. I think if you're talking about a large enterprise, if you can actually create some kind of a multiplier inside the organization that gives you an advantage, that would be a revolutionary usage of Gen AI. And so we've actually experimented with this a little bit in our small team. But if you can take, for example, performance reviews, or if you can do assessments across multiple groups and say, plot data of like a sales team on the East versus a sales team on the West, and understanding where their strengths are, that LLMs and large language models actually can do a really good job of consuming those results, consuming a framework for which to think about them, and then actually allow you to now ask questions and understand like what could team A learn from team B, and get these kinds of insights that may not be obvious when you're looking at a giant like set of survey results, but you could actually create a multiplier inside the organization and actually build a 10x team, as opposed to like each team working in their own silos.
But I think that's going to end up coming, as I was mentioning earlier, from the vendors you're already using? Because that would be something I would expect Salesforce to then provide me as a service to be able to give me those. So
they're going to get it. They're going to get a revolutionary usage out of LLMs one way or another.
You're right.
But, okay, I'm going to challenge you on this one. Is that really moving the needle? Because a lot of the things I'm hearing are things that enterprises may believe they're already doing, that they already have access to, that they can achieve in different ways, that, is generative AI actually doing something you can't otherwise do? For example, we saw an example today, a demonstration today of a system that you can query to see arbitrary information using RAG, retrieval augmented generation, which connects a database to an LLM. We saw a system that allows you to query it about support, basically query your technical support database and about aspects of your product, whether it does this, whether it does that. Is that actually needle-moving technology, or is that just a better, different search engine? I mean, is it really revolutionary? Because Calvin, you just said revolutionary.
Right, almost
is
there.
It really revolutionary?
I think it is. I think humans can't hold the amount of context in their brains that the LLMs are capable of doing even right now. Like you look at the Gemini million token plus context windows, that gives you the ability, if you think creatively about the usage of it, to feed it a lot of information that we can't even comprehend as a human being. Like you were talking about this at lunch earlier too, is that there's just it's such a big set of data, we can't make sense heads or tails of it, but the LLMs actually do a really good job with this.
Well, volume of data doesn't mean value of data.
But I think that it gives you an opportunity to extract value from the data.
Well, what it gives you, and this goes to the other side of it as well. Like even as we find things, like the difficult part is going to be going back and validating whether or not what we're getting from these systems is accurate and the direction we need to take, right? It's, a trust but verify, because a computer can tell you whatever it wants based on whatever data it had access to.
And I'll put it this way. I have seen, and I'm sure it was on, today's news and yesterday's news, and every week or so there's an article about, AI is going to replace your job, right? And I think the last one I saw was AI is going to replace the CEO's job. And I think that that's a very naive view of it.
Agreed.
Right? It's just naive, and the reality is that particularly the current public large language models are trained on data that's available publicly on the internet, which is then used, as Josh said in his perfect example, to generate new publicly available data on the internet. And very soon we're going to be in this recursive situation where LLMs are being trained on their own output.
Mm-hmm. Which I would point out, we're actually already in. So as of this recording in May of 2024, that is a massive topic in the AI industry, because I record an AI podcast. I have been very focused on the nuts and bolts of how these things work. Synthetic data is a very big topic in the AI industry. It is very widely used, and it is interesting to think about where that goes. And again, I will come back to it. Are these use cases really revolutionary? Is this just hype?
That's my point, is from the very high level, from the 50,000 foot level of the enterprise looking at it and saying, I'm investing in AI. Do I go and build my own AI engine? Do I go and train it? How many millions of dollars does it cost to train an LLM for my application specific environment?
Well, and the answer there is abso-frickin-lutely not. I'm just going to tell you right now, get this out of your head. Enterprises will not be building their own AI models. That is asinine, and no one's going to do it.
And I don't think they'll be fine-tuning them either.
They may be fine-tuning. They may be doing transfer learning. Probably not. Yeah.
All right. They'll be relying on things like the technology, like RAG and vector databases and embeddings. Right. I think there's a lot of value in quick, easy wins there, especially when it comes to retrieval of if you can have the knowledge of an enterprise more evenly accessible to the whole enterprise, I think there's some gains that'll be made there as well. A lot of repetitive or reproductions, or someone reinventing the wheel can be hopefully avoided.
I guess the cautionary tale I have is really much more of understand what you're doing. Just jump into it and say, okay, now I can do this with AI. Now I can do that with AI. It is not the silver bullet that is going to magically transform your today.
Big data.
That's going to magically
Big data is the
transform
silver bullet.
Right. That's going to transform your organization.
To be honest, I think big data has a much more likelihood of moving the needle for many enterprises than generative AI specifically.
Well, the combination of the two, if you have your big data story down and you've got really well structured data, you now have got an advantage to actually extract bigger value out of it.
Yeah, I'll provide a counter position here. I actually do believe that we have had this really great outcome of this movement around DevOps, in that now everything has an API, and APIs are something that these tools eat up. And it makes it extremely simple to get 80% of what you need done using one of these generative AI systems. And when you think about that, now we're hitting a point where the time to market to put out certain features or capabilities will continue to shrink, or more importantly, the integrations between different components and getting them to work more effectively together. Because these tools, they like the structure of an API, they're able to consume it, get a general enough understanding to produce just good enough for a proper developer or an admin or someone to fine tune it and make it work specific for that environment. So when I think about what I expect over the next couple of years to make an impact that we look at, that's the one that I'm most bullish on. I think that one's got the biggest chance.
So I guess let's wrap this thing up with, I'm going to go back to you guys, back to the original premise of our discussion. Is generative AI specifically going to move the needle for the average, Fortune 2000 enterprise?
Not for many years.
100%. I see it in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I think it's going to. I think we're going to start seeing it as I outlined. It's going to be in the tools that they're already buying and in very specific API-driven things. But I don't think they're going to be called successes for several years.
Well, there you have it, folks. We don't have an answer. But
Par for the course.
But this was actually, I think, a really interesting discussion, because this is the question that many of our listeners, many of our viewers, most of our, the Tech Field Day audience are wrestling with, because we deal with people who are IT decision makers. They're out there in enterprise. They're trying to do their jobs. They're interested in the technology. They're excited in technology. And they're talking to business leaders who jump on the hype train here and jump on the hype train there. And they have to try to help those those people, kind of talk them down from the edge and say, no, this is what this technology can really do, whether it's virtualization or blockchain or big data or digital transformation or AI. Yes, these things could move the needle. No, they're not going to do it on their own, because no technology is going to do it on its own, right? It's all about how you use it. So thank you very much for joining us for this episode of the Tech Field Day podcast, recorded live at AppDev Field Day on premises. Before we go, I'm just going to go through, tell us where we can find you, where we can continue this conversation.
Thank you. You can find me on LinkedIn and starting my own blog soon.
You can find me on LinkedIn as well, on Calvin HP, and most places on the internet.
And best spot for me is on LinkedIn. It's Josh Atwell. It's pretty easy.
And as for me, I'm Stephen Foskett. You can find me at sfoskett pretty much everywhere. And of course, you can find me here on the Tech Field Day podcast every Tuesday, unless it's Tom Hollingsworth. You can also find us on Wednesdays for the Gestalt IT Rundown. And of course, you'll see a lot more Tech Field Day coming up in 2024 and beyond. Thanks for listening to the Tech Field Day podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, please do subscribe. You'll find us in your favorite podcast application. You'll also find us on YouTube. You can also visit our website to find more episodes of this. Go to techfieldday.com/podcast. Thanks for listening, and we will catch you next week.